still lots of questions about the future legal and constitutional ramifications of the Supreme Court's decision this morning overturning this important precedent.
Where does the country go from here? Joining us to examine this is Robert Schapiro, Dean of the University of San Diego School of Law. Welcome again.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, another day, another decision. Of course, this one not a surprise given the draft opinion that was leaked. What do you think this will mean for states like California that protect abortion rights?
I think what we're going to see is in about half the country, things are going to be pretty much the way that they were. Women will have full access to abortion and other reproductive services. The real issue is going to be in other places, what's going to happen there. And as was the case really before Roe, and we've seen that wealthier women who can afford to travel will still have access. But for poorer women, women who it's more difficult to travel, and again, traveling, if you have a job that you're going to lose or you have some children you're taking care of. So the real weight of this decision is going to fall on women who are in more difficult circumstances in about half of our states.
Robert, you were a clerk for a Supreme Court justice back in the 90s during the last major challenge to Roe versus Wade. I'm talking about Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Is this decision out today the official end of our perception as the high court as apolitical?
Well, I think it's hard to read this decision other ways against the background of politics. I think certainly that view of the court as apolitical may have eroded. But certainly, I think that this decision thrusts the court into the midst of partisan politics. And certainly when you think about how this decision came about, because the Republicans in the Senate refused to consider Barack Obama's nominee for the Supreme Court when Justice Scalia died in February before a November election. And then by contrast, when Justice Ginsburg died only a few weeks before the next election, Donald Trump and the Republicans rushed through the confirmation of Justice Barrett. So with that kind of background and then this decision resulting, I think the political view of the court is certainly going to be strengthened.
You know, this morning in a concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the High Court should, quote, reconsider a number of other key rulings in the future related to other things, including contraception and same-sex marriage. We're hearing a lot of people concerned about what this Roe decision could mean for those rights going forward. What do you think?
I think it's a very serious question. If you look at the new method that the court really adopted today to look at constitutional rights, to the central question they asked is, well, at the time the Constitution was written, or in 1868 when the 14th Amendment was adopted, would it have been considered that there was a right to an abortion? And the answer they say is no. But of course, that would also be true of the right to contraception, certainly true of the right to same-sex intimacy or same-sex marriage. And then the majority opinion says, oh, but those things are all different because it's not about abortion. But the whole method of analysis that they use undermines those rights. And then exactly, you have Justice Thomas who says, and by the way, I think we should overrule all of those precedents based on the analysis that the court used. Now, he said maybe there's some other basis for those rights, but not the one on which the court has relied for the last 60 years. So I think it certainly presents many, many questions about rights going back to contraception and certainly including same-sex intimacy and same-sex marriage.
So basically the Supreme Court decision kicks things back to the states, and there's a lot of talk now about potential battles between states as some states try to basically prevent women from seeking abortions outside their state lines in other jurisdictions. How do you see that playing out?
I think we certainly will see some conflicts along those lines. I see that Justice Kavanaugh in his separate concurrence just said, by the way, I think that a state could not keep a woman from leaving the state to go to another state to get an abortion. So at least suggesting that there might be a majority of the Supreme Court that would think dimly of that. But who knows actually when the decision would happen. Now, the court says we're going to throw it back to the states. But of course, it really also opens the door for congressional legislation. Congress could step in now and ban abortion nationwide, or Congress could step in likely and protect abortion. So the conflict may go state by state, and we may also see more conflicts in Washington.
Robert Schapiro, Dean of the University of San Diego School of Law, thank you so much. We do so appreciate your insights.
Thank you.